are some tomatoes that I grew from seed earlier this year, and as you can see, they're getting to the point now that they're ready to plant out in the garden. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to properly plant tomatoes so that you can have a fantastic harvest. I'm Monica Hemingway with the Gardening Products Review. Stay tuned. When you're going to plant your tomatoes outside, the first thing to do is make sure that the temperatures are warm enough. So tomatoes are warm season plants, and that means that the temperatures at night have to be over 50 degrees, otherwise they will sulk, they won't grow, they might even die. So make sure, first of all, that the evening temperatures are warm enough. One thing you can do to make sure that you're not planting your tomatoes too early is to find the average last frost date for your region. And there's a link underneath this video to a website that'll show you that. So plant when there is no more expected frost. It's better to plant a little too late than it is to plant too early. So these tomatoes are ready to go. So they are big enough. Some of them are a little spindly. Don't worry about that. I'm going to show you what you can do about it. But most importantly, these have been hardened off. So they've spent about 2 weeks slowly getting acclimated to outdoor temperatures. So they've been in the sun for a few hours and then a few hours more. And eventually I got them to the point where they're staying outside overnight. So when I plant them, they're going to be fine. If I suddenly just took them from inside and planted them outside, they're going to go into shock. They aren't going to know what hit them, and they probably won't make it. So be sure you've hardened off your seedlings. Now, I'm going to plant, what am I going to plant? I'm going to plant one called Brad's Atomic Grape. Now this is an indeterminate tomato, which means it keeps growing all season and it keeps putting out fruit all season. Other types of tomatoes are called determinate, and they simply grow, then they stop growing, and they put out all their fruit all at once. So those are great if you're doing canning or if you're going to make sauce or something like that. If you want something to eat all season, you're going to grow an indeterminate tomato. So that's what this one is. So as you can see, I've just pulled it out of the container it was growing in, and you can see lots of nice roots there. But it has a long spindly stem. So I'm going to do something that might surprise you. Is I'm going to pick off some of these. What the heck, I'll take this one off too. And I'm going to plant it really deep. I'm going to plant it up to here so that only these top 3 sets of branches are going to actually show above the ground. So why am I going to do that? Tomatoes put out a lot of roots, but one thing that is really different about them, and this is the only plant that'll do that, the only vegetable other than tomatillo as well, is on this stem, if you plant it underground, it's going to put out roots along that stem. And the more roots you can make this thing produce, the stronger it's going to be, the healthier it's going to be, the more easily it's going to bring in nutrients and water, and you're going to have a better harvest. So, plant it deep. Now, I'm planting this one in a raised bed, and it's got some pretty nice soil in here, nice mix. It's got lots of organic matter. Tomatoes are really heavy feeders, so they need a lot of nutrients. So compost is fantastic. What I'm also going to put in this hole, this nice deep hole, are a few things that are going to get this tomato off to a great start. This is Earthworm Castings, big bag. I just got it at Costco, and I'm just going to put a handful in there. The other thing I'm going to add in is some slow release tomato and vegetable fertilizer. As I said, tomatoes are really heavy feeders. They need a lot of extra nutrition, so I'm just going to put a little bit in there with it. I'm going to mix that up a little bit. Now this soil already has a lot of compost in it that I added in, so I'm not going to do that. If I didn't have a lot of compost in here, I would also put some compost into the hole right now. Okay, now the tomato is planted. As you can see, most of the stem is underground. And one thing that you might notice here is I've got an irrigation line right next to it with 2 emitters. Tomatoes need constant moisture. If you let them dry out, they're not going to do well. So by putting it on an irrigation system like this with emitters right by it, I can guarantee that it's going to get enough water. But now that I've planted it, the very first thing I'm going to do is I am going to water it in with some water with a bit of compost tea. So that's going to give it some additional nutrients to get it started. And I'm going to water it in really well. Now you can see I made a bit of a well around the tomato so that the water will stay there. The final step with planting this tomato is to give it some support. Now there are all sorts of different support options. I happen to like these ones. They work pretty well. But, you know, a normal tomato cage will work. You can make your own out of wire. Some people just tie it to a stake. Other people use string to grow it up. Whatever works for you is just fine, as long as you've got some kind of support for your tomatoes. Now that is how you plant a tomato in the ground. But what happens if you don't have room in the ground to plant tomatoes? This is the only spot I've got in our garden here in Tucson. We don't have very good soil here, and I grow mostly in elevated planters and in containers. So I'm going to show you how to plant a tomato in a container, because it's going to be a little bit different depending on the container you plant it in. So this is another option for growing tomatoes. This is actually a self-watering planter. It's from Gardener Supply. It's specifically for growing tomatoes, although you can grow anything in it. Now again, tomatoes, you want to plant them deep. This thing is only that deep, so you can't really easily plant it like you saw with the one in the ground. So how do you plant a tomato deep in something like this? Now I'm going to plant 2 tomatoes in here. That's kind of pushing it, but it will work. And I say it's pushing it because each tomato, you want to have a minimum of 5 gallons worth of good quality potting mix with at least 50% organic matter in it. This is, a little bit small for 2 tomatoes, but that's what it's designed for, so I'm going to put 2 tomatoes in it. So just as I would in the ground, I'm going to add some amendments to this trench that I've dug here. Again, I'm going to put in some worm castings, a little bit of slow release fertilizer. Now there is some in this mix already. And the other thing I'm going to do is add about a couple of tablespoons or so of this. This is garden lime, not hydrated lime, it's garden lime. I'm doing that because one of the problems you get with tomatoes, especially when they're grown in a container, is blossom end rot. And that's, if you've ever seen it, you get a tomato and it's green and the end of it is rotten and brown. And that is usually due to a calcium deficiency. When you're planting in a container, you're watering it a lot to keep them nice and moist, and it's leaching all the nutrients out of the soil. So by adding that extra calcium, which is what you find in garden lime, you're going to be helping to prevent that blossom end rot. Now you'll see here I've got my trench, and I'm simply going to lay the tomato down in it, just like that, and cover it up. So the only thing that's sticking out is the top. Now don't worry about it. I mean, the rest of the stem is down here underground, and it is going to grow roots and become much stronger and better able to take up water and nutrients. So you're going to have a healthier plant with more fruit on it. So I've got one here. I'm going to put another one right here in a trench, and I'll have 2 tomatoes in this container. So just like in the ground, I'm going to water these in. Give them a good drink. This is compost tea. I use actually compost tea bags that I get from Sustain. They work really well. You don't have to make your own compost tea. And once these are watered in, the next step then is to put a support in place. And one of the things I like about this system from Gardener Supply is it comes with an optional support that just is made to fit right in this container. So there we go. We've got 2 tomatoes now growing inside this cage. This will hold them in place. The other nice thing is we've got problems here with birds eating the tomatoes, so I can cover this with bird netting. So the last option is another container planting of a tomato. And you can see I've got a 5-gallon bucket here. There's 4 holes drilled in the bottom for drainage. I've got a good quality potting mix in here. Don't use garden soil. You want to use something that's specifically for containers. That has, again, probably 50% or more organic matter to help retain moisture and provide nutrients for your plant. And because this is so deep, I can actually plant in this container the same way I would in the ground, simply by digging a deep hole. Now, one thing you'll notice is I already have this support in here. I couldn't get this all the way down into the bottom of the bucket if I didn't put it in before I put the potting soil in. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you're putting a support in a bucket like this. Now again, put my amendments in. And this one, I'm putting in a tomato called Tasmanian Chocolate. I got this from Renee's Garden Seeds. This is a bush tomato. It's specifically for containers, so it shouldn't get too big. It's going to grow 2 or 3 feet. You'll notice I took the leaves off again, and this time I can plant it deep, straight down in the middle of the container. I'm going to top it up with a bit of more potting soil and water it in, and it's ready to go. Thanks for checking out this video on how to plant tomatoes. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, why don't you subscribe to our channel? There's a link right down here below. And you can also find us on gardeningproductsreview.com, where we have reviews of tools and products used in the garden, as well as more how-to articles and videos.